The detention chamber hummed with the low vibration of energy shields, casting an eerie blue glow across the metallic walls. Captain Sarah sat motionless in the restraint chair, her brown eyes studying every detail of her prison. 3 days had passed since her fighter was shot down over the contested moon of 442b, and the interrogators had learned nothing from her except her name, rank, and service number. The main door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing Commander Vex 7, the station's head interrogator. His reptilian features were sharp and angular, with golden eyes that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone. Behind him walked 2 guards, their plasma rifles held at ready position. "Human," Vex 7 said, his voice carrying the distinctive clicking undertone of his species. "You have proven remarkably stubborn. Most prisoners break within the first day of our standard procedures." Sarah remained silent, maintaining the 1,000-yard stare she had perfected during survival training. They had tried everything from neural probes to psychological manipulation, but human military conditioning was apparently something they had never encountered before. Vex 7 circled her chair slowly, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. "Your Terran Defense Force believes you died in the crash. No rescue is coming. No one knows you are here. Yet still you resist telling us about your fleet's movements in this sector." The commander stopped in front of her, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. His breath smelled of sulfur and ozone. "Do you know what makes this particularly amusing, human? Your species is considered weak by every major galactic power. You have no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no telepathic abilities. You are soft, fragile creatures who should have been conquered within days of first contact." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing. The truth was, humanity had surprised everyone when the first invasion fleets arrived at Earth 2 years ago. What the aliens had expected to be a quick conquest had turned into a grinding war of attrition that now stretched across 17 star systems. "Your silence speaks volumes," Vex 7 continued, straightening to his full 7-foot height. "But I have grown tired of this game. You will tell me what I need to know about your fleet's defensive positions, or I will be forced to employ more extreme measures." For the first time in 3 days, Sarah spoke. Her voice was steady, almost conversational. "Go ahead, do your worst." Vex 7's golden eyes narrowed. In his 40 years as an interrogator, no prisoner had ever maintained such composure after experiencing the neural disruptors. The human's pain tolerance was beyond anything in the scientific literature about their species. "Very well," he said, activating a communication device on his wrist. "Prepare holding cell 7 for immediate use. Authorization Vex 7 Alpha Prime." The response came through his translator with mechanical precision. "Acknowledged, Commander. Cell 7 is being prepared. Shall we begin standard containment protocols?" "Negative," Vex 7 replied, never taking his eyes off Sarah. "Implement protocol, full release parameters." The guards exchanged nervous glances. Even through their environmental suits, Sarah could see their body language change. Whatever protocol meant, it clearly made these battle-hardened soldiers uncomfortable. "Sir," one of the guards ventured, "are you certain? The Council's restrictions are very specific. Use only in cases of extreme necessity and never without proper." "I am well aware of the restrictions," Vex 7 cut him off sharply. "This human has classified information that could determine the outcome of our campaign in this sector. That qualifies as extreme necessity." Sarah watched this exchange with growing interest. In 3 days, she had learned to read body language fairly well. Fear was apparently universal, and these aliens were definitely afraid of whatever they were about to unleash. The communication device crackled again. "Commander, this is Director 3 from Special Containment. We need your personal authorization code for 9 release. Are you absolutely certain about this course of action?" Vex 7's irritation was evident in the way his crest flattened against his skull. "Authorization code Vex 77 Delta 9 Prime. Release immediately." "Understood, Commander. Will be transported to your location within the hour. We recommend clearing all non-essential personnel from that section of the station." The connection terminated, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the detention chamber. Sarah studied Vex 7's expression and realized that even he seemed to be having second thoughts about his decision. "What's 9?" she asked, genuinely curious. Vex 7 turned to face her, his expression a mixture of anticipation and barely controlled fear. 9 is our most effective interrogator. She has never failed to extract information from a subject. Never. She. Indeed, you seem surprised that we would employ a female for such work. Perhaps your species' primitive gender biases are showing. Sarah almost smiled at that. If this alien only knew how many female drill sergeants and interrogation specialists the TDF employed, he might reconsider his assumptions about human gender roles. The thing is, Vex 7 continued, beginning to pace again, 9 is not. She belongs to a species called the They Are, unique in the galaxy. Unique how? Vex 7 stopped packing and stared at her with those unsettling golden eyes. They possess certain abilities that make them exceptionally gifted at psychological manipulation. They can sense fear, pain, and weakness in ways that no other species can match. More importantly, they can amplify those sensations until the subject's mind simply breaks. For the first time since her capture, Sarah felt a cold knot of genuine concern in her stomach. Psychological warfare was something the TDF had prepared for, but if this alien could literally manipulate her brain chemistry, her training might not be enough. 9, Vex 7 said with something that might have been admiration in his voice, is the smallest member of her species we have ever encountered. Barely 3 feet tall, but size means nothing to the. What matters is the intensity of their abilities, and 9's abilities are unprecedented. The commander activated his wrist communicator again. Status report on the transfer. 9 is being moved to the transport now, Commander. Her containment team reports that she seems particularly excited about this assignment. She asked specifically about the subject's species. What did you tell her? That it was a human, sir. She became very animated after that, almost eager. Vex 7 frowned. In the 5 years since had been acquired by the Empire, she had always been coldly professional about her work. Her enthusiasm about interrogating a human was unexpected and slightly disturbing. Commander, the voice continued, wishes to review all available files on human psychology and physiology. She says it will help her prepare her techniques. Grant her access to everything in our xenobiology databases, Vex 7 replied. I want this human broken within 6 hours. Understood, sir. Transport will arrive at your location in 37 minutes. The connection ended, and Vex 7 turned back to Sarah with something that might have been sympathy in his expression. I suggest you use this time to reconsider your position, human. Once begins her work, there is no stopping her. She will tear apart your mind layer by layer until nothing remains but the information I need. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I've told you before, Commander, do your worst. But as she said those words, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover just how much worse things could get. The fear in the guards' voices, the nervous energy radiating from Vex 7, and most disturbing of all, the fact that this creature was apparently excited to work on a human subject. She had always known that capture was a possibility in this war. Every TDF pilot accepted that risk when they climbed into their fighters. But as she sat in that sterile detention chamber, listening to the hum of alien technology and the distant sounds of the space station around her, Sarah began to wonder if her training and determination would be enough to face whatever was coming through that door in 37 minutes. The waiting was the hardest part. She closed her eyes and tried to center herself, drawing on every meditation technique and mental discipline exercise she had learned during her 15 years of military service. If this creature could sense fear and weakness, then she would have to find a way to bury those feelings so deep that even an alien telepath couldn't find them. But even as she prepared herself mentally for whatever torture was coming, a small part of her mind was already working on a different problem. They were clearly afraid of their own weapon. That suggested vulnerabilities, weaknesses that might be exploited if she could just figure out what they were. The transport arrived precisely on schedule, its docking clamps engaging with the station's hull in a series of mechanical thuds that resonated through the detention level. Sarah could hear the activity in the corridor outside her cell as additional security teams took their positions. Whatever was about to walk through that door required an impressive amount of precaution. Commander Vex 7 stood at attention near the entrance, his posture rigid with military discipline that couldn't quite hide his underlying nervousness. The 2 guards had been joined by 4 more, all carrying what appeared to be specialized containment equipment rather than standard weapons. Remember, Vex 7 said to his team, Maintain minimum safe distance at all times. Do not make direct eye contact with 9 unless she specifically requests it. And under no circumstances are you to interfere once she begins working, regardless of what you see or hear. The warning sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She had endured torture before during survival training, but the clinical way these aliens discussed their interrogator suggested something far beyond conventional methods. The detention chamber's main door cycled open, and Sarah got her first glimpse of the creature that had every on the station terrified. Her initial reaction was complete bewilderment. Was indeed tiny, standing barely 3 feet tall as Vex 7 had claimed. Her appearance was almost childlike, with delicate features and large, luminous silver eyes that seemed to take up half her face. Her skin had a pale, almost translucent quality that gave her an ethereal appearance, and her movements were graceful to the point of being hypnotic. If Sarah had encountered this being anywhere else in the galaxy, her first instinct would have been to protect it, not fear it. Looked like something that should be playing in a garden, not conducting interrogations for a military empire. But then those silver eyes focused on her, and Sarah understood instantly why the guards were so frightened. The moment Nine's gaze met hers, Sarah felt something alien and invasive brush against the edges of her consciousness. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was deeply wrong in a way that made her skin crawl and her vision blur momentarily. The sensation was like having someone rifle through her thoughts while wearing sandpaper gloves. "Fascinating," Nine said, her voice musical but carrying an undertone that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's bones. "I have studied the files on human psychology, but experiencing your mental structure firsthand is quite different from the theoretical models." She moved closer to Sarah's restraint chair with those impossibly fluid movements, her head tilted at an angle that no human spine could achieve. "Your fear responses are active but contained. Your pain tolerance appears to be within normal parameters for your species, yet you have resisted standard interrogation techniques for an unprecedented duration. Most intriguing." Commander Vex 7 stepped forward, careful to maintain the prescribed distance from his interrogator. "9, this human possesses critical intelligence about Terran military positions. I need that information extracted immediately." The tiny alien didn't acknowledge his words, instead circling Sarah's chair with predatory grace. "Tell me, human, what is your name?" "Captain Sarah, Terran Defense Force, service number." "Yes, yes," interrupted with a dismissive wave of her delicate hand. "I care nothing for your military protocols. I want to know who you are, what drives you, what do you fear?" Sarah remained silent, focusing on the mental exercises that had gotten her through 3 days of interrogation. She tried to visualize her thoughts as a fortress, with thick walls and locked gates that no intruder could breach. Nine stopped directly in front of her and smiled. The expression should have been comforting on such an innocent face, but instead it filled Sarah with a primal terror that she couldn't rationally explain. "Ah," they said softly, "you are trying to shield your mind. How delightfully primitive. You think of your thoughts as a castle to be defended with walls and barriers. This is why your species struggles so much with telepathic contact. You approach it like a military problem to be solved through force." The alien reached out with one small hand and gently touched Sarah's forehead. The contact sent shockwaves through her nervous system, as if every nerve ending in her body had suddenly caught fire. "But consciousness is not a fortress, Captain. It is a river, and like all rivers, it seeks the path of least resistance." The pain intensified, but it wasn't physical agony in any conventional sense. Instead, it felt like her thoughts themselves were being twisted and reshaped, as if someone was rewriting her memories while she watched helplessly. Sarah gritted her teeth and forced herself to focus on her training. She had survived 2 years of combat against impossible odds. She had watched friends die, had killed enemies with her own hands, had made decisions that haunted her dreams. But she had never broken, never surrendered, never given up. "Impressive willpower," Nine observed, as if she were commenting on the weather. "But ultimately futile. You see, Captain, I am not trying to break through your defenses. I am simply going to make them irrelevant." The closed her eyes and her touch grew lighter, almost gentle. But the sensation in Sarah's mind became exponentially more invasive. It was as if Nine was no longer trying to force her way past mental barriers, but was instead becoming part of the barriers themselves. "Your military training teaches you to compartmentalize trauma. Nine said, her voice now seeming to come from inside Sarah's head rather than through her ears. You lock away painful memories and emotions in mental boxes, believing this makes you stronger. But what happens when someone else has the key to those boxes? Images began flashing through Sarah's consciousness, memories she had buried years ago. The first time she had killed an enemy soldier. The morning she received news of her brother's death. The look in her mother's eyes when she left for military academy at 17. "Stop," Sarah whispered, but the word seemed to dissolve before it could leave her lips. "You are beginning to understand," Nine said, and Sarah could feel the alien's satisfaction like a warm poison spreading through her thoughts. "I am not torturing your body or even your conscious mind. I'm simply removing the locks you have placed on your own memories and emotions. All the pain you have spent years learning to control is still there, Captain. It was always there." The memories came faster now, overwhelming Sarah's ability to process them. Every moment of fear, every instant of doubt, every second of grief that she had forced herself to move past was suddenly present and immediate, as if they were all happening simultaneously in the current moment. But something unexpected happened as the flood of traumatic memories crashed over her. Instead of breaking her will, they began to crystallize into something else entirely. Each painful memory was connected to another memory. The moment she had overcome that pain, survived that trauma, grown stronger from that experience. "What?" Nine's voice carried a note of confusion that hadn't been there before. "This is not the expected response pattern." Sarah felt the alien's grip on her consciousness falter slightly, and she seized the opportunity to reassert some measure of control over her own thoughts. Through sheer force of will, she began to organize the chaos that Nine had unleashed. Yes, she remembered her first kill, but she also remembered why she had pulled that trigger, to save the lives of her squad mates who were pinned down by enemy fire. Yes, she remembered the crushing grief of her brother's death, but she also remembered the promise she had made at his funeral to honor his memory by protecting others. "You are," Nine pulled her hand back from Sarah's forehead as if she had been burned. "You are using the pain as fuel. This should not be possible." For the first time since entering the detention chamber, the tiny alien looked genuinely unsettled. Her large silver eyes were wide with something that might have been surprise or even fear. Commander Vex 7 stepped closer, his own confusion evident in his posture. "What is wrong? Why have you stopped?" Nine turned to face him, her graceful movements now sharp and jerky. "The human's neural patterns are unlike anything in our databases. When I attempt to weaponize her traumatic memories, she somehow transforms them into sources of strength rather than weakness." "That's impossible," Vex 7 said flatly. "No species can consciously redirect psychological manipulation of that magnitude." "Nevertheless," Nine replied, her musical voice now carrying an edge of frustration, "that appears to be exactly what is happening. Every attempt I make to break her will only seems to reinforce her determination." Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "That's what humans do. We take damage and we learn from it. We take pain and we grow stronger. You can't break something that's already been broken and put itself back together 100 times." Stared at her with those unsettling silver eyes, and for a moment, Sarah saw something she hadn't expected: respect. "Fascinating," the alien said quietly. "Your species may be more dangerous than our intelligence reports indicated." Commander Vex 7's crest was now fully erect with agitation. "Can you extract the information or not?" Was silent for a long moment, studying Sarah with the intensity of a scientist examining a completely new form of life. "I will need to employ more direct methods," she said finally. "Methods that may cause permanent psychological damage." "Do it," Vex 7 ordered without hesitation. But as Nine raised her hand towards Sarah's forehead again, something in the tiny alien's expression had changed. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by what looked almost like reluctance. "Tell me, Captain," she said softly, "how many others of your species possess this same mental resilience?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "All of us." The lie came naturally, but as she spoke the words, Sarah realized that it might not be entirely false. Human military personnel were trained to endure and overcome trauma in ways that might be completely alien to species that had never faced the kind of existential challenges that had shaped human evolution. Nine's hand hesitated inches from Sarah's face, and in that hesitation, Sarah sensed an the silence in the detention chamber stretched for several heartbeats as Nine maintained her position, hand hovering just inches from Sarah's forehead. The tiny alien silver eyes seemed to be processing calculations beyond anything the watching could comprehend. "You hesitate," Sarah observed quietly, keeping her voice steady despite the exhaustion from resisting the mental assault. "That's interesting. In all your files and protocols, did anyone ever mention what happens when your greatest weapon stops being willing to fire?" Nine's head tilted at that impossible angle again, but her expression remained thoughtful rather than threatening. "You believe I am experiencing doubt about my mission." "I believe you're smart enough to recognize what this means," Sarah replied. "You tried to break me using the most invasive psychological techniques in the known galaxy. Not only did I resist them, but I used them to make myself stronger. That's not just unusual for humans, that's completely unprecedented for any species you've encountered." Commander Vex 7 moved closer, his frustration evident in every gesture. "Nine, you will complete your assignment. The Empire has invested considerable resources in your development, and I will not accept failure." They didn't even acknowledge his words. Instead, she slowly lowered her hand and took a step back from Sarah's chair. "Tell me about your military training, Captain. Specifically, how your species prepares soldiers to endure psychological trauma." Sarah studied the alien's face carefully. Something fundamental had shifted in Nine's demeanor, and she sensed that her next words could determine whether she lived or died. More importantly, they might determine the outcome of the entire war. "Human military doctrine is based on a simple principle," Sarah said. "We train our people to expect that they will be broken, that they will face situations beyond their ability to handle, that they will fail and fall and suffer. But we also teach them that breaking is not the end. It's the beginning of becoming stronger." She paused, watching as Nine's silver eyes seemed to grow even larger. "Every human soldier knows that pain is temporary, but quitting is permanent. We build our entire psychological framework around the idea that no matter how bad things get, they will get better if we just survive long enough to see it happen. This explains the anomalous resistance patterns," murmured, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. "Your species has essentially immunized itself against the psychological techniques that work on every other known sentient race." Commander Vex 7's crest was now fully extended with agitation. "What are you saying? That the human is immune to interrogation?" Nine turned to face him, her delicate features set in an expression of scientific fascination mixed with growing concern. "Commander, I am saying that this single human may represent the greatest strategic threat the Empire has ever faced." "One prisoner, don't be ridiculous." "Not one prisoner," corrected him. "One example of what an entire species is capable of. Think about the implications, Commander. If humans can resist our most advanced interrogation techniques, what else might they be capable of? What other assumptions about their limitations might be catastrophically wrong?" Sarah watched this exchange with growing hope. The tiny alien interrogator was clearly having some kind of revelation about human capabilities, and the fear in her voice was becoming more pronounced with each passing moment. "I need to access the strategic files on the human war effort," Nine said, her musical voice now urgent. "All of them. Combat records, casualty reports, tactical analyses, everything." Vex 7 looked confused but activated his wrist communicator. "This is Commander Vex 7. Grant full access to all files related to the Terran conflict. Priority Alpha clearance." The response came immediately. "Acknowledged, Commander. Now has unrestricted access to all strategic databases." The closed her eyes and went perfectly still. Sarah realized that she must be accessing the computer systems directly through some kind of neural interface. For several minutes, the only sounds in the chamber were the ambient hum of the station's systems and the nervous shifting of the guards. When opened her eyes again, her expression had transformed completely. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like terror. "Commander," she said slowly, "we need to contact the High Command immediately. This war must be ended, now." Vex 7 stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about? We are winning. Human forces have been in steady retreat for the past 6 months." "No," Nine said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "We are not winning. We are walking into a trap that we cannot even comprehend." She moved to the chamber's main display screen and activated it with a gesture. Tactical maps and statistical analyses began scrolling past at incredible speed as she compiled her findings. "Look at the casualty ratios," she said, highlighting specific data points. "In every major engagement, human forces inflict significantly more damage than they receive, even when outnumbered by factors of 10 to 1 or greater. Their technology is more advanced than we initially believed," Vex 7 argued. "That explains the discrepancy." "No, Commander, I have analyzed their equipment specifications. Human technology is actually inferior to ours in most categories. Their ships are slower, their weapons are less powerful, their armor is weaker. They should have been defeated months ago." Sarah watched as more data appeared on the screen: battle reports, strategic analyses, intercepted communications. The picture that emerged was staggering even to her. "The humans," 9 continued, "are compensating for their technological disadvantages through psychological advantages that we never anticipated. They fight with a determination that borders on the impossible. They sacrifice themselves for tactical objectives that other species would consider worthless. They continue fighting even when victory is mathematically impossible." She pulled up a specific battle report and highlighted several sections. "Look at this engagement at station. A single human destroyer, hopelessly by 3 of our cruisers, managed to inflict critical damage on all 3 before being destroyed. The human crew had multiple opportunities to surrender, but they chose to fight until their ship literally fell apart around them." "Fanaticism," Vex 7 said dismissively. "Primitive cultures often exhibit irrational devotion to lost causes." "This is not fanaticism, Commander. This is something far more dangerous." 9 turned to look directly at Sarah. "Captain, tell him about your military doctrine regarding acceptable losses in strategic operations." Sarah met the alien's gaze and realized that 9 had somehow grasped something that the military completely missed. Human military doctrine accepts that casualties are inevitable in warfare. We plan for them, we prepare for them, and we ensure that every loss serves a larger strategic purpose. We don't fight to minimize our own casualties. We fight to maximize the enemy's. "Impossible," Vex 7 said flatly. "No species willingly accepts massive casualties for marginal strategic gains." "Every species does exactly that," Sarah corrected him. "The difference is that humans are honest about it. We don't pretend that war is anything other than organized violence in service of political objectives. We train our people to understand that their lives matter less than the mission, and we make sure that understanding is based on rational strategic calculations rather than blind faith." 9 nodded slowly. "This is why the standard psychological warfare techniques failed against her, Commander. Human military conditioning specifically prepares them to function effectively even when experiencing maximum psychological stress. They have weaponized their own trauma responses." She activated another display, showing projected casualty rates based on current engagement trends. "If this war continues, the Empire will achieve a Pyrrhic victory at best. Even if we eventually overwhelm human forces through sheer numbers, we will have lost so many ships and personnel that we will be vulnerable to every other rival power in the galaxy." "You're suggesting we negotiate with them?" Vex 7's voice carried disbelief and disgust in equal measure. "I am suggesting," said carefully, "that we seriously reconsider our strategic objectives in this conflict. The humans are not the primitive savages our intelligence reports indicated. They are something much more dangerous, a species that has evolved to thrive under conditions that would destroy any other known race." She gestured toward Sarah. "This single prisoner has demonstrated psychological resilience that exceeds anything in our databases. If she is representative of her species' capabilities, then we are not fighting humans. We are fighting monsters who happen to look harmless." For the first time since her capture, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "We're not monsters, we're just survivors, and we've gotten very good at it over the—" The detention chamber fell silent again as the implications of this revelation settled over everyone present. Commander Vex 7 looked like he was struggling to process information that contradicted everything he had believed about the war effort. 9, meanwhile, was staring at Sarah with an expression that might have been admiration or fear, possibly both. "Commander," the tiny alien said finally, "I recommend that we treat this prisoner not as a source of intelligence, but as a diplomatic contact. If the Empire has any hope of ending this conflict without catastrophic losses, we need to understand exactly what we are dealing with. Vex 7 activated his communicator with obvious reluctance. This is Commander Vex 7 requesting immediate priority contact with Fleet Admiral Prime. I have strategic intelligence that requires immediate review at the highest levels. As they waited for the connection to be established, Sarah found herself looking at 9 with new understanding. The tiny alien had just done something extraordinary. She had allowed the evidence to change her mind, even when that evidence contradicted everything. Her entire holographic image of Fleet Admiral Prime materialized in the detention chamber with the characteristic shimmer of long-range communication technology. The Admiral was an imposing figure even in projection, standing nearly 8 feet tall with the distinctive cranial ridges and ceremonial scars that marked his rank within the military hierarchy. Commander Vex 7, the Admiral's voice carried the authority of someone who commanded over 3 million soldiers across 17 star systems. Your message indicated strategic intelligence requiring immediate review. I trust this is not another routine interrogation report. Vex 7 straightened to full attention, but Sarah could see the uncertainty in his posture. Admiral, the situation has developed beyond our initial parameters, has made discoveries about human psychological capabilities that may fundamentally alter our strategic approach to this conflict. The Admiral's reptilian eyes shifted to the Tiny, who had remained perfectly still throughout the conversation. 9, report. The alien interrogator stepped forward, her movement still graceful despite the obvious tension in the room. Admiral, I have conducted extensive psychological analysis of the human prisoner, supplemented by comprehensive review of all available combat data from the current conflict. My findings suggest that our intelligence assessments of human military capabilities contain critical errors. Explain. 9 gestured toward the tactical displays that still showed casualty ratios and engagement statistics. Human forces are not simply technologically inferior opponents fighting a doomed resistance. They represent a psychological warfare capability that exceeds anything in our experience with other species. Admiral Prime's expression remained neutral, but Sarah noticed his attention sharpening. Psychological warfare is your specialty, 9. Are you suggesting that humans possess telepathic or empathic abilities comparable to the... No, Admiral, their capabilities are far more dangerous than that. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Even through the holographic projection, Sarah could see the Admiral's shock at this declaration. The human species, 9 continued, has evolved natural immunity to psychological manipulation techniques that are effective against every other known sentient race. More significantly, they have developed military training protocols that weaponize their own trauma responses, making them stronger rather than weaker when subjected to extreme stress. She activated a detailed analysis on the main display. I attempted to employ standard interrogation procedures against the human prisoner. Not only did she resist successfully, but she actually converted the psychological pressure into increased mental fortification. This should be impossible according to all established research. Admiral Prime studied the data scrolling across the screen. You are saying that humans cannot be broken through conventional interrogation. I am saying that attempting to break humans may actually make them more effective opponents, 9 replied. Their military conditioning specifically prepares them for psychological trauma. They expect to suffer, they plan for it, and they have developed cultural and individual coping mechanisms that transform suffering into strategic advantage. Sarah watched this exchange with growing amazement. These aliens were beginning to understand something that humans themselves rarely articulated, that their species' greatest strength came not from avoiding hardship, but from learning to thrive despite it. Furthermore, 9 continued, analysis of combat records suggests that human tactical doctrine is based on acceptable loss ratios that would be considered criminally wasteful by any other military organization in the galaxy. They routinely sacrifice significant resources to achieve marginal strategic objectives because they understand that small advantages accumulate into decisive victories over time. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note that Sarah had never heard from before: uncertainty. What are your strategic recommendations based on these findings? Nine exchanged a quick glance with Commander Vex 7 before responding. Admiral, I believe we must fundamentally reassess our objectives in this conflict. If humans possess the psychological resilience to wage extended warfare despite massive casualties, and if their military doctrine is specifically designed to maximize enemy losses rather than minimize their own, then this war may be unwinnable through conventional means. Unwinnable? The Admiral's crest flattened against his skull in an expression of barely controlled anger. The Empire has committed 17 fleets to this campaign. We have achieved tactical superiority in every major engagement. Yes, Admiral, but at what cost? 9 activated another display showing projected casualty trends. Human losses are indeed higher than ours in absolute numbers, but their replacement rate appears to be sustainable while ours is not. More critically, each engagement improves their tactical performance while degrading ours. She highlighted specific data points throughout the analysis. Human pilots shot down in previous battles are recovered, retrained, and returned to combat with increased effectiveness. Human ships destroyed in one engagement provide design improvements for the next generation. Human tactical failures are studied, analyzed, and converted into revised doctrine within weeks. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she listened to this assessment. Had identified something that many humans took for granted, their species' ability to learn from failure and use it as a foundation for future success. The humans, 9 said, treat each defeat as a learning opportunity rather than a cause for demoralization. This means that our tactical advantages are temporary, while theirs are cumulative. Admiral Prime was silent for several minutes, studying the data with the intensity of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled. Finally, he spoke directly to Sarah for the first time. Human, you have remained silent during this analysis. Do you have anything to add to these assessments? Sarah met his gaze through the holographic projection, choosing her words carefully. Admiral, everything your interrogator has told you is accurate but incomplete. She's described human military capabilities, but she hasn't addressed the larger strategic picture. Explain. This war began because your empire believed humans were weak and easy prey. You attacked our colonies, destroyed our outposts, and killed our civilians because you thought we couldn't fight back effectively. You made the same mistake that every aggressive species in human history has made. She paused, letting that statement sink in. You assumed that our peaceful nature meant we were pacifists. You confused our preference for diplomacy with inability to wage war. You mistook our willingness to negotiate with weakness. Admiral Prime's expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes. And what mistake was that precisely? You gave us a reason to fight, Sarah said simply. Humans can be remarkably peaceful when left alone. But when you threaten our families, attack our homes, and attempt to enslave our people, you discover that we are absolutely ruthless in defense of what we value. She gestured toward the tactical displays still showing battle statistics. Every human pilot, every ship captain, every soldier in this war is fighting not just for territory or resources, but for the survival of their entire species. You have created an existential conflict where surrender is literally not an option. All species fight more effectively when defending their homes, the Admiral pointed out. No, Admiral, they don't, Sarah corrected him. Most species fight desperately when cornered, but they also know when to surrender to preserve their existence. Humans don't surrender when facing extinction. We become extinct or we make our enemies extinct. There is no middle ground. 9 nodded slowly. This explains the anomalous casualty acceptance rates. If humans genuinely believe that defeat means species extinction, then any loss ratio short of total annihilation is acceptable. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. And here's what your intelligence reports probably haven't told you. Humans have survived multiple extinction-level events throughout our evolutionary history. Ice ages, eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues that killed 90% of our population. We are the descendants of the survivors, and we carry their genetic and cultural memory. She leaned forward as much as her restraints would allow. Your empire is fighting a species that has already survived the worst the universe can throw at it. What makes you think you can do worse than complete ecological collapse? The detention chamber fell silent except for the hum of station systems. Admiral Prime appeared to be processing information that challenged every assumption upon which the war effort was based. 9, he said finally. What is your assessment of the prisoner's strategic analysis? The tiny alien considered the question carefully before responding. Admiral, I believe the human is providing accurate intelligence about her species' psychological and cultural capabilities. More importantly, I believe she is offering us an opportunity to end this conflict before it becomes a mutual extinction event. You believe the Empire faces extinction from this war? I believe, Nine said quietly, that we have initiated a conflict with a species specifically evolved to survive and win unwinnable wars. If we continue on the current trajectory, we will achieve a Pyrrhic victory that leaves us vulnerable to every other power in the galaxy. Admiral Prime was quiet for a long moment before addressing Sarah directly. Human, are you prepared to participate in preliminary diplomatic discussions regarding cessation of hostilities? Sarah felt hope flare in her chest for the first time since her capture. Admiral, I am a military officer, not a diplomat, but I can tell you that humans have always preferred negotiated solutions to military ones when negotiated solutions are possible. And what would make negotiated solutions possible in this case? Recognition that both our species have legitimate interests that don't have to be mutually exclusive, Sarah replied. Humans don't want to conquer the galaxy. We just want to survive and thrive in it. If the Empire can accept human independence and territorial integrity, then there's no reason we have to be enemies. The Admiral nodded slowly. I will contact the High Council immediately to discuss these developments. Commander Vex 7, you will maintain this prisoner under diplomatic protection protocols until further notice. 3 weeks later, Captain Sarah stood in the observation deck of the command station, no longer as a prisoner, but as an official diplomatic liaison. The transformation in her circumstances had been as dramatic as it was unexpected, but the view of human and ships maintaining peaceful formations in the same system still seemed surreal. The preliminary ceasefire had held for 12 days now, the longest pause in hostilities since the war began. Both sides were using the time to evacuate wounded, resupply their fleets, and most importantly, explore whether a permanent peace was actually possible. Captain, a familiar musical voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see, approaching, her tiny form moving with that same graceful precision that had once seemed so threatening. They had become an unexpected ally in the peace negotiations, using her analytical abilities to help both sides understand the psychological foundations of the conflict. Sarah replied, still adjusting to the strange friendship that had developed between them. Any word from the High Council? The diminutive alien joined her at the observation window, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the transparent aluminum. The Council has reached a preliminary decision. They are prepared to recognize human territorial sovereignty in exchange for formal non-aggression treaties and regulated trade agreements. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. After 2 years of devastating warfare, the possibility of peace had seemed like an impossible dream. What about reparations for the colonies that were attacked? The Empire will provide technological assistance for reconstruction efforts, along with formal apologies for the initial aggression, Nine replied. In exchange, humans will share certain medical and agricultural technologies that could benefit both our civilizations. It was a reasonable compromise, Sarah thought. Humans had always been better at biological sciences than most other species, while they excelled at engineering and energy technology. A peaceful exchange of knowledge could benefit everyone involved. There is one additional matter, Nine continued, her tone becoming more serious. The High Council has requested that I remain as a permanent liaison between our species. They believe my unique perspective on human psychology could prove valuable in maintaining long-term diplomatic relations. Sarah studied her small companion's expression. And how do you feel about that? Was quiet for a moment, watching the ships moving in formation outside the station. I spent 5 years as the Empire's most effective interrogator because I believed that breaking my subjects was simply a matter of applying the correct psychological pressure. I was very good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them. She turned to face Sarah directly. But you taught me something I had never considered, that some species turn their weaknesses into strengths rather than hiding from them. Humans don't deny their capacity for fear, pain, and despair. Instead, you acknowledge these feelings and use them as motivation to become better than you were before. It's not always that simple, Sarah admitted. Sometimes the trauma wins. Sometimes people break and never recover. We're not invulnerable, we're just stubborn. Stubborn enough to survive impossible odds, observed. Stubborn enough to forgive enemies who attacked without provocation. Stubborn enough to build peace from the ashes of war. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as human and engineering teams worked side by side to establish the communication relays that would support ongoing diplomatic contact. The sight would have been unthinkable just a month ago. Sarah said eventually, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "When you first tried to interrogate me, you seemed almost eager to work on a human subject. Why was that?" This expression became thoughtful. The Empire's databases contained very limited information about human mental processes. Most of what we knew came from intercepted communications and behavioral observations during combat. I was curious to test my techniques against a completely unknown psychological framework. She paused, her silver eyes growing distant with memory. "What I discovered was that human psychology isn't unknown, it's unprecedented. Your species has developed mental resilience through evolutionary pressures that no other race in the galaxy has experienced. You are genuinely unique." "Unique how?" "Most intelligent species evolved under conditions where cooperation within the group was essential for survival, but external threats were manageable through avoidance or submission. Humans evolved under conditions where external threats were so severe that survival required not just cooperation, but the ability to continue functioning effectively even when facing certain death." Nine gestured toward the human ships visible through the observation window. "Every human carries the genetic and cultural memory of ancestors who survived by refusing to give up when giving up was the rational choice. This is why conventional psychological warfare fails against your species. You have been psychologically conditioned by millions of years of evolution to thrive under impossible circumstances." Sarah considered this assessment. It explained a lot about human behavior that she had always taken for granted. Their species' tendency to attempt the impossible, their refusal to accept defeat even when victory seemed mathematically impossible, their ability to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming despair. "Is that why the Empire is willing to make peace?" she asked. "Because they realized we're too stubborn to be conquered." "Partly," Nine admitted, "but also because the High Council has come to understand that human psychological resilience could be an asset rather than a threat. The galaxy contains many dangers that require exactly the kind of persistence and adaptability that your species has mastered." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Commander Vex 7 entered the observation deck. His posture was more relaxed than it had been during her interrogation, but she could still see the wariness in his movements when he approached. "Captain," he said formally, "I have received confirmation from both the Human Diplomatic Corps and the High Council. The preliminary peace treaty has been by all parties. Hostilities will officially cease at 0 hours tomorrow, Galactic Standard Time." Sarah felt a surge of emotion that surprised her with its intensity. After 2 years of war, countless friends lost, and entire worlds devastated, the simple words, "hostilities will cease," carried more weight than any victory celebration. "Commander," she said, "I want you to know that this couldn't have happened without your willingness to question your assumptions about human capabilities. A lot of military officers wouldn't have been flexible enough to change their entire strategic assessment based on new intelligence." Vex 7's crest flattened slightly in what Sarah had learned was the equivalent of embarrassment. "I nearly made a catastrophic error in judgment. If Nine had not recognized the implications of your psychological resistance, this war might have continued until both our civilizations were destroyed." "But you did listen to her," Sarah pointed out. "And you had the courage to contact Fleet Admiral Prime when the evidence contradicted everything you believed about humans. That takes a special kind of intellectual honesty." The three of them stood together at the observation window, watching history being made in the space between their fleets. Ships that had been trying to destroy each other just weeks ago were now working together to establish the infrastructure for lasting peace. "Captain," said quietly, "there is something else you should know about the Council's decision. They have officially classified humans as a protected evolutionary treasure under galactic law." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "What does that mean?" "It means that the Empire recognizes human psychological capabilities as unique and valuable to the broader galactic community. Any species that attempts to attack or enslave humanity will face intervention from the full combined military forces of the Empire. You're making us your protected allies. We are making you our partners, Commander Vex 7 corrected. The Council has realized that human psychological resilience could be essential for dealing with external threats that neither of our species could handle alone. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of this revelation. Humanity had gone from being considered weak prey to being valued as essential partners in galactic security. The transformation was almost too dramatic to believe. What kind of external threats? She asked. 9 and Vex 7 exchanged a meaningful glance before the tiny alien replied. There are things in the deep void between galaxies, Captain. Ancient intelligences that view all organic life as a threat to be eliminated. The Empire has been aware of them for centuries, but we have always assumed that conventional military strength would be sufficient to repel any invasion. And now we understand that conventional military strength may not be enough, Vex 7 said grimly. When not if those entities arrive in our galaxy, we will need allies who can continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. We will need soldiers who become stronger when facing certain death rather than weaker. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what they were telling her. Humanity's evolutionary trial by fire wasn't over. It might have just been preparation for an even greater challenge. How long do we have? She asked. Unknown, 9 replied. Could be decades, could be centuries, but when they arrive, the galaxy will need every advantage it can get, and humans, Captain, may be our greatest advantage. As Sarah looked out at the peaceful fleet formations, she realized that her species' long journey of survival was entering a new chapter. They had proven they could survive extinction, endure slavery attempts, and even forgive their enemies. Soon, they might have to prove they could save the galaxy itself. But looking at the ships working together in the starlight, watching former enemies become allies, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: optimism about the future. Humans had always been at their best when facing impossible odds. This time, they wouldn't be facing them alone. As the holographic projection faded, Sarah realized that something extraordinary had just happened. The Empire's most feared interrogator had just become an advocate for peace, and she had done it by recognizing that sometimes the greatest strength comes from admitting when you're wrong. Believed. Maybe, Sarah thought, there was hope for peace after all. But first, she would have to convince an entire empire that their greatest enemy was also their only hope for that might not come again. For the first time since her capture, Captain Sarah allowed herself to hope that her story might not end in this detention chamber after all.